Okay guys, this is video 2 on dispatch releases, and this one's going to be a little briefer compared to the first one. The first one was dealing with domestic IFR dispatch release, and this one is going to be dealing with flag. So it's going to be the differences with flag. So it's going to be a little bit quicker, so just bear with me here. If I go a little too fast, just watch the first video for the flight from Denver to Seattle. That domestic IFR release video will be probably better for you. All right, so we're Southwest 1299, so yeah, check mark there. We're going from Puerto Vallarta to Phoenix. That checks out. The date, everything on the date checks out, looks good. I forgot to mention this, but 2988 is our jet plan number. That's what we put in the ACARs in the real plane, so that it knows which dispatch release to correlate with. So we'll make a note of that. 2988, that's what we'll enter to the computer. All right, so yeah, we're flight 1299, that checks out. We're departing Puerto Vallarta to Phoenix. Everything looks good there. So we are a flag operation, that's important. And flag basically just means that we're not staying within the 48 contingency, the lower 48 of the United States, the contiguous United States of America. We're going outside of that. And specifically Southwest typically just does flag operation for Mexico. But it just all depends. Sometimes you require less fuel if you do a flag operation versus a domestic operation. So it all depends, but typically the shorter routes, like to Mexico, or if you're not going to be going too far away from the U.S., flag typically is a better option. But if you start going even further, you can actually dispatch under domestic, and it's kind of confusing to explain it, but so I won't go into too much detail. But do know that you can dispatch under domestic even outside the United States. There's certain stipulations and everything with that. We might make a video about that some other time. But anyways, this is a flag operation. And like I said before, these remarks we don't really care about. 8668 Alpha, we just check and make sure we're on that airplane and that matches, so we're good there. 1589, that's my ATOG. I'll circle that. Loaded by landing, make sure we're that. Come back down here to our landing performance. We check and we see, okay, yep, 1589, that matches. So we are limited by structure, so by our max landing weight on the aircraft. 166.8 for our en route drift down, and so that is more than 1589, and 174.2 for our max takeoff weights, limited by structure. So this is indeed our ATOG. So we will circle that. So that checks out. So we will not exceed this weight on takeoff. That's our absolute limit. Okay, we don't have an alternate on the release. No alternate 1, no alternate 2, so we're good. All right, so now this is when things get a little interesting for our flag operations, because we typically don't have CPDLC or PDC capability outside of the United States. So we'd actually have to call for our IFR clearance on the frequency with ATC. As you know, or at least as you notice here, we do not file a SID outside the United States typically, okay? We just filed the first point on the for the en route portion, for the transition to the en route portion. We don't actually file the SID itself, so BOBD. So we'll be doing the BOBD 1 Bravo. So most likely what's going to happen when we call for clearance, they're going to give us BOBD 1 Bravo. So here we would just put a 1 Bravo and put a check mark. So we just want to kind of follow along as they give us the IFR clearance, okay? So upper Tango 4 is going to be our first airway. So if they say upper Tango 4, we're going to put a check mark. Lima Mike Mike. If they say Lima Mike Mike, we're going to put a check mark. Upper Juliet 3. If they say upper Juliet 3, we're going to put a check mark. Charlie Echo November, check mark. Upper Juliet 7, check mark. Hermosillo, check mark. Juliet 92, check mark. And then, or J92. Technically it's J92, but ATC in Mexico will probably call it Juliet 92, but in the US it would be referred to as J92. And then you got Via. So Via, and then Tucson, Hot, and then ping 1 arrival. That's typically what they're going to do, or they might just say Via up to Via and then say as filed. It might do one or the other. So it just depends on how the controller feels that day in Mexico. But that's typically how things go when you get an IFR clearance out of Mexico. All right, so we check our top climb here, 400, flight level change 400. They are the same, so no step climb, so we get a check mark there. We got our winds here, and temps, so we'll get those entered. Make sure those are correct. When we do uplink to FMC, it should get all that entered for us on our FMC. MELs, we got no MELs, so nothing's broken on the airplane. We got a good jet. We now have to look at the reg for 121.645 to make sure we have our required fuel for a flag operation. So we take a look here, we're going to see there is a slight difference in the fuel required for our 121.645 operation here for flag. So A doesn't apply to us because we are not staying within the 48 contiguous United States of America or the District of Columbia. So that doesn't apply to us, so we're not going to worry about that. So we're certificate holders conducting flag or supplemental operations. Supplemental is going to be basically your cargo operations or your non-scheduled airline operations, such as Sun Country, for instance, Sun Country, or charter operations. So IFR, which is Swift Flight. So Swift Flight, that would be a supplemental operation. It's going to be a little different for those guys, but we're doing a flag operation here, so we care about flag. So outside the 48 contiguous United States to DC, unless authorized by the administrator, so that's the FAA, in the operation specifications, which stay tuned, that's going to be important soon here at Southwest Virtual. No person may release for flight or take off a turbine engine powered airplane other than a turbo propeller powered airplane, which that doesn't apply to us, unless, considering wind and other weather conditions expected, it has enough fuel, so one, to fly to and land at the airport at which it was released. So in this case, it would be Phoenix. So we're planning to arrive at Phoenix. All right, so we got that taken care of. After that, to fly for a period of 10%. So let's write that down real quick. So we got, so it's 12.6, 2 hours and 13 minutes. That's your en route burn. That's what it's talking about right there. So that's the first check mark. That was 1. All right, 2. After that, to fly for a period of 10% of the total time required to fly from the airport departure to land at the airport at which it was released. Okay, so we have 2:13. So 2 hours and 13 minutes. That is going to be 120 plus 13. So I'm just going to do this for make things a little bit easier here. So we'll go 120 plus 13 in minutes. So that's 133. So we do 133. We get 10% of that. So we do times 0.1, and we get 13.3. So we need 13.3 minutes. So we go down here to 10%. So 10% right here, and you got 1,300 pounds of fuel, 13 minutes. So there you go. There's number 2. So we got that to be legal. All right, so 2 is taken care of. 3, after that, to fly to and land at the most distant alternate airport specified in the flight release, if an alternate is required. So we take a look here. We don't have an alternate, so clearly we don't require an alternate per flag rules. We can talk about that maybe in a different video, seeing the difference. It's not the 1, 2, 3 rule. It's slightly different for flag. So we don't have an alternate, and that will also show here alternate 0. So that doesn't apply to us, so we're good there. We don't need to worry about that part. Also, something else to keep in mind, this also applies to flights leaving the mainland, going to Hawaii, or going from Hawaii, going back to the mainland. So those flights are flag, and they fall under these rules. So if you're leaving the mainland United States, going to Hawaii, or leaving Hawaii, going back to the mainland, then you fall under flag operation, okay? If you're flying inside of the islands, I'm fairly confident that Southwest still dispatches under domestic rules. I could be wrong about that, but that's something we'll have to verify with somebody in the future. I don't know anyone that dispatches ETOPS, so we'll get the answer on that one for sure. But I do know for a fact if you're leaving the mainland, going to Hawaii, or going Hawaii back to the mainland, then you do fall under flag rules. So you got to follow this. Okay, so after that, to fly to the alternate, we talked about that already. So 3 is taken care of. And then 4, after that, to fly for 30 minutes at holding speed at 1,500 feet above the alternate airport or the destination airport if no alternate is required under standard temperature conditions. So If we take a look at that here, we have 30 FAR, which is what it's talking about, 2,400 pounds of fuel, and that's 30 minutes. So we're legal there. So there's your legal fuel right there for flag. And that also doesn't include 121,647. So we need to go take a look at that. By the way, when I was talking about the landing performance before for the wet runway and everything in the last video, that's reg 121,195. I forgot to mention that. So 121,195 is that reg that we were talking about. So 121,647, we go here. So like I said before, each person computing fuel required for the purpose of this subpart shall consider the following. So wind and other weather conditions forecast. We didn't get any dispatch on this release, I don't believe. So nope, so no dispatch. So we don't have to worry about that. So we're good. Anticipate traffic delays. So we take a look here, cont hold. So our cont hold, we got 1,400 and that's 15 minutes. And that's legal fuel required for the flight. Get a check mark on that. That is legal fuel because we are under 121,647, anticipated traffic delays. That includes cont hold, and that'll show down here. Arrival, station, contingency fuel, impact, 15 minutes. So get a check mark there. All right, so we're legal on that. One instrument approach and possible missed approach at destination. So we don't have an alternate plan on the release, so that does not apply to us, so we can move on. We don't need to go over that. So D, any other conditions that may delay landing of the aircraft. So if for whatever reason the dispatcher thought that, you know, maybe there was weather en route or there was ATC delays going into Phoenix or whatever that could possibly cause us to have delays, then we would have to plan the fuel accordingly per the regulation in order to be legal for the flight. So just looking at this, it looks like our min takeoff is 17.6. I'll focus that up so you can see it. So 17.6. So I'm going to circle that, check mark. That's my limit right there. I cannot take off below that, 17.6. I need to have this much fuel when I enter the runway. I check on my prog page here. I can see on my prog page I got 18.3 right now. So if I'm below this when I apply takeoff thrust, I'm illegal. So that's a problem. We need to make sure we have at least 17.6 when we apply takeoff thrust on the runway. Otherwise, we have to call the dispatcher. And we could call the dispatcher if we think that we're going to possibly run into this problem. If we're getting close to it in the line on takeoff, we can call the dispatcher, or ACAR's the dispatcher, and we can, you know, try to get that that number reduced. And we can get that number reduced actually by taking anything that's not required fuel. So this is required fuel, right? Anything with the check mark here that I put, these are all this is required fuel. So 30 FAR, can't do anything about that. 10%, can't do anything about that. So we take a look at cont hold. So this technically can get reduced. Now, this is the minimum plan that Southwest is ever going to plan. They never plan less than 15 minutes on a release for a cont hold. That being said, if there's joint agreement between the dispatcher and the captain, you technically can legally reduce this. So if you needed to drop this by like 200 pounds and get this down to like 1,200, you could do that, and then that would cause this to be 17.4 now. This would be reduced because this is just a sum of all of these totaled, if that makes sense. Now, if you ever do that, that's called a pen and ink. You're amending the release. A pen and ink. This is a legal document, and you're amending the document. So what you need to do in that situation is you got to put your initials or the dispatcher's initials, which that's probably what I would do. Put the dispatcher's initials here. Put the time so that there's a record of. And the dispatcher would do the same thing. The dispatcher would put your initials, so the captain's initials, and the time in Zulu. You always do Zulu, just so that there's a record that there was an official amendment to the release. And the colloquial term in the airline world is called pen and ink. So you would literally pen and ink the release. As an example, I can show you real quick. So let's say our dispatcher's initials were CB. His first name started with the C. His last name started with the B. So we could put CB slash and put the time. So current time is 2321 Zulu. So 6 hours. Let me just make sure I got this right. So current Zulu time would be let's see, 0522 Zulu. So 05. So this would be 0522 22 Zulu. And that's your pen and ink. That's what it looks like. CB/0522 Zulu. And then this would just be reduced. So you would just do, instead of 617.6, you just cross that out, put 4 there. So it's 17.4 now. So you got 17.4. And then that's because we took this con hold, we reduced this. So 1400, we just shave that off. Now that's a 2 instead. So now it's 1200. So now that's 17.4. And that's how you do your pen and ink there. So if that makes sense. And like I said, you have to have the dispatcher's initials and the current Zulu time in order for that to be a legal amendment to the release. All right, so now that we got that all figured out, we can do our fuel up top here. So we're going to put it cross. Now, we're going to pretend, because this would be when we're out by the runway, you know, engines running, and you know, we're in the line for takeoff. So, you know, that's just, it's kind of out of order the way I'm doing this. I just want to kind of go over each thing like in a vertical way here. But anyway, so we have our cross here. So remember, we put our min planned here. I'm sorry, our FOB. We put our FOB here, so 18.3. So we're going to put 18.3 for our current FOB on the airplane. So 18.3. And then we're going to put our min planned on the release. So in this case, our min planned is going to be 18.2. So 18.2. And then we're going to put our min takeoff, so our original min takeoff. So that would be 17.6. So 17.6. And then lastly, our arrival fuel down here, 5.2. So I like that. 5.2 sounds great to me. No issues with that. So 5.2. Now remember, our reserves on the FMC are going to be 4.4. That gives us a 400-pound buffer from our company min fuel. Our company min fuel at Southwest is 4,000 pounds. Emergency fuel typically is considered 3,000 pounds in the 737. So just keep that in mind. So if you ever see this number down here below 4.4, that's something to be concerned of, because you're definitely going to get an insufficient fuel warning, it's going to show that you're burning into reserves on the FMC, and that's a problem. So we want to make sure that this number is at least 4.4. I would not want to have this number below 4.4. So just keep that in mind. All right, so we got our fuel up here ready to go. So you could clip this to the yoke, just like this, like how they do at Southwest. You clip that to the yoke, and you still have your fuel information ready to go right there. So you can keep that clipped the whole flight, and that's typically how they do it at Southwest. Okay, let's see what else I missed here. So planned taxi out fuel 400. So gross weight on the FMC, just remember the gross weight's always going to be your planned takeoff weight here. So it's going to be the total of your zero fuel weight of 120.1 or whatever the actual zero fuel weight is on the airplane, plus the FOB, so plus 18.3 in this case. And then it's going to always include your planned taxi out fuel, so 400 pounds in this case. That's your gross weight, is the total of all those. I don't think I mentioned that in the last video, so I just want to make sure you're aware of that. Winds aren't too bad for this flight, so we have 7-knot headwind, so we can get that circled right there. Not too bad. 40 cost index, pretty standard, no issues there. Let's see here. So we're planning takeoff from runway 22 at Puerto Vallarta and runway 26 at Phoenix. Wind calm. I explained why we always plan wind calm typically in dispatch. I also explained why we typically always plan a wet runway for landing. It's just for legal reasons. So anyways, 158.9. So yeah, even if it's a dry runway, we're gonna plan wet just in case, unless we're running into a weight restricted situation, and then if we are, then we will plan a dry runway, as long as it's expected to be a dry conditions when we get to our destination based off of our ETA. 158.9 is our ATOG, limited by structure. So this is the 800. So you see this is 800. So 146.3 is our max landing weight. So the way you get this number here, since it's structurally limited, you're gonna take your max landing weight here, for 146.3, you're going to add your burn to that. So let's do it in the calculator real quick. 146.3. So we go back here. So 146.3 plus our burn, which is 12.6. So 12.6. And we get 158.9. Does that match our ATOG? Well, what do you know? Look at that. So there's our ATOG. It does match up. So that's how you get that number if you're limited by landing. And remember, this could be this right here, this LM, this limit could be a landing or a takeoff or an en route. So L's for landing, T's for takeoff, E's for en route. And you got these down here. So whichever of these three is the lowest of these three numbers, that's going to be your ATOG limit. So this is your ATOG limit right here, 158.9. So that's how you get that. Lastly, we can take a look at the weights here. So OW is your operating weight. Doesn't matter, it's just the empty weight of the airplane, basically, with nothing on board the airplane. So then you have your payload. So that's all your passengers and bags and cargo and everything planned. So Southwest, we always plan 1 adult and 1 bag per adult. That's how Southwest plans. So this would be 27,300. 27,300. It's winter time, so we divide that by 242. You can watch the other video I explain in more detail how we get those numbers, 242 versus 237. And so there you go. You got about 113 passengers on board the airplane. So we can put that right here. So 113 packs. This is just something I like to do personally. I don't know any airline pilots like at Southwest that actually do this, but if you want it for additional information, it's good to have. So zero fuel weight 120.1. We just make sure that doesn't exceed mag zero fuel weight, which it does not. FOB. So I wrongly last video did this. I was looking at 17.8. This is our takeoff fuel, so I don't really care about that. What I want to actually go down to is my max plan. This is what I'm probably going to put on the airplane, 18.2. And I also can take a look here, 18.3. I see 18.3 is on board the airplane right now. I just need to make sure we don't exceed this 46.1 ever. This is our max tank capacity on the airplane, max fuel weight, 46.1. So I just need to make sure that is not exceeded, and it's not, so we're good. And then max takeoff weight 174.2. That's our structural max takeoff weight. 130 is what we're planned to take off at, so we're legal there, so we don't need to worry about that. And then our landing weight here, 125.4. We just need to and also for the takeoff weight, we just want to also, of course, make sure we're not above ATOG 158.9. And we're not. 138 is good, so we're good there. If this number was ever above this, we'd have a huge problem, and we'd have to call dispatch, and they'd probably be getting called into the office, because that's not a good thing. If you're ever getting planned above ATOG, there's some serious issues. Okay, so landing weight here, 125.4. So we take a look here, and it does not exceed our 146.3 structural limitation of the airplane, max landing weight. So we're good there. So we'll just put a check mark there, and we pretty much have a legal release based off of everything I'm seeing. I don't see any problems. So, but that's pretty much your differences. Really, the biggest difference is your fuel. And whether, obviously your alternate requirements are going to change slightly with a flag operation versus a domestic operation. So, but anyways, yeah, that's pretty much the gist of how a flag operation dispatch release works, how it's marked up. If you guys have any questions, reach out to your chief pilot at Southwest Virtual, and or you could reach out to the training team, whatever will float your boat. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little tutorial, and I hope you guys watch the next video too. We're gonna probably put out some other ones here regarding dispatch releases and pen and inking and stuff like that.